Party Buff.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Party Buff. We're back. It's me, Aussie, and Az, and we're alive. We're well, and we're doing and talking about the things that make it so hard to be a gamer and a streamer, which is life getting in the way and then restarting from where we left off. And sometimes that is a real problem in the gaming world. Whenever you come back to a game that you either haven't touched in a long time or, God forbid, never finished in the first place, then have to remember what you were doing and how it worked a long time ago is a real struggle. So as we get started here, let's think about the games that either we never got around to finishing and want to, that we're struggling to do, or the games that we have finished and wanted to restart, and talk about the challenges that come along with restarting something that we've left on hiatus for a very long time. And I'll start with mine. Here's a game I have not actually finished yet because the game was going really smoothly until the final boss battle, and suddenly, I don't know what the hell's wrong with me, I can't finish the thing, and I'm talking about Phantom Brave. Phantom Brave is a favorite game of mine, and it's really kind of cute. It's a little Atlas game, and I love the Atlas games. And it's a really fun storyline, and I got to the final boss and I thought, I'm over-prepared for this. Look at how awesome I've been in the previous fights, and I am getting trounced every time. So I stopped. And now I want to go back and see if I could finish it, but I've tried it before, and I still suck. So that's a big struggle for me. Az, do you have a game that you have not finished that you had to take a break from, and now you want to come back at it and go, okay, what was I doing?
Well, I definitely finished Witcher 3, so I always got to bring it up at least once a podcast. At least once a podcast. One day, CD Projekt Red will give me that sponsorship one of these days. But so a game that
It'll be the new voice of Geralt after Doug Cockle's gone, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Me and him, we sound so alike, you know. We can't tell the difference. Well, actually, I was just looking through my library actually just yesterday. And Hades came up because people are talking about it again. Yeah, and Aussie loves that game. Well, see, the thing is with streaming and life and work and all that kind of stuff, like I'd play the game, think I like the second boss. I enjoy the game a lot. Problem is, now I also don't feel that much of a motivation to go back because I forgot how to play. It's been like I looked at the thing and I said I played it 8 months ago. 8 months ago. That's literally, I haven't. If you do the math right now, that's back in December of last year. So that means I haven't even touched the game this entire year, pretty much, since 2021 started. So, like, well, Hades is a little bit better because it's a roguelike. You know, you don't need to really worry about the story, so to speak, that much. Even though it has a good story, it's a little bit easier to get into. Mm-hmm. But I find that if you take, even 2 or 3 months away from a game, you come back to it, it might as well be a brand new game at that point. You might as well restart. Yep. So, yeah. So for me, I'm gonna try to get back into Hades, but if it, for the general question, if I ever end up leaving a game behind or never getting around to it, I end up restarting it because there's really no point to trying to get back right in the middle of it, and you forgot what the whole storyline was about, and you forgot about how the controls work, and you're like, okay, at this point, let's just get restart fresh and then go from there.
Agree. What about you, Aussie?
So this is kind of an ongoing joke on my stream. Is I'm notorious for starting games and never finishing them. Pretty much always have been. Damn. People bring up games, they're like, "Hey, have you played this?" And I was like, "I have, but I never finished it." And I have a mod who every time I say that, it's like, "Surprise, a fucking prize." That's shocking. So just games as a whole, I feel like unless there's a very compelling story or something, and we've kind of talked about this in the past of how games can reward you and keep you invested, right? I think unless there's something a very good system in place to keep things moving, I have a habit of playing halfway through a game and being like, this is going to be more of the same, and just kind of burning out and going and playing something else. As mentioned, I'm actually very into roguelikes, and I think part of that is because they are kind of designed to be started over, right? You're sort of meant to just get your ass kicked, go back to the beginning, get better at it each playthrough. So if you haven't played in a while, you can jump back in. So something like Hades, I played a lot of Dead Cells in the past. I'm sure there's 101 different roguelikes that I'm forgetting, but basically anything I can start over, anything I can pick up a year later and be like, oh, this is all fresh and new again, and it's still fun, right? I think story-based games are really difficult for me, especially. I recently replayed through Breath of the Wild because I had started that when the Switch first came out, and I got maybe 30, 40, 50 hours into it, and then got distracted with other things. Tried to go back to it a time or two, and just had no idea what was happening. Didn't know where I was in the story, didn't know the controls, and so Breath of the Wild was just like this game that everyone loves was just shelved for me for the longest time because I had no idea what was going on with it, and it only allows one save slot, so I didn't want to wipe out my like 40, 50 hours of progress.
Eesh.
And so I think that's, depending on how the game's set up, it can be easier to jump back into it or not, but with that said, I am a big fan of games that kind of make starting over a little easier.
I was going to bring up Breath of the Wild too, because I want to get back into it. They obviously had the new expansion, the new DLCs for it with the Master Sword Trials, and I got the motorcycle. I did. I know that on Shin's account we did the Master Sword Trials. I don't think I ever did them on my account, just because it had been so long since I played it. I felt like I didn't know what I was doing anymore. I also feel that sometimes the games that we play that do have replayability, and I've talked about Stardew Valley in the past. In fact, I just started another farm, and I've been working on it. I've been spoiled by my fancy tools, and now I'm back to basic tools. I'm like, I want to be able to chop down a tree in 3 hits. I don't want to have to do 15 hits to chop down a tree. What is this nonsense? Mm-hmm. So you have to forgive yourself for knowing what you're doing and then not having the tools, or the other way around, coming back into a game that you have all the tools and have no idea what the hell to do with them.
Yeah.
I feel that's the bigger problem.
It's funny you mentioned like the DLC for Breath of the Wild too, because that's definitely another thing for me. Is there's so many games that I play through, and then a DLC comes out 6 months later, and like it's so difficult to jump back into the DLC because I just have no idea what I'm doing. You know what I mean? It's like you're starting fresh, but going into something that's like a new challenge. So I think depending on the game, it can be really tough to kind of like jump back on that horse, so to speak. And I think. I don't know. There's a lot of games that I like to wait until all of the DLCs release and get like.
Yep, I was just about to say that.
Yep.
Because
the Game of the Year edition.
Just play it all at once.
Borderlands.
And one financial tip, actually. Financial tip. If you wait for that, you end up getting the whole thing, and you get it for a much cheaper price than you would have if you just bought the game and the DLC. Especially with so many games out nowadays. You know what I mean? Like, at least for me personally, like I'm still playing games like that was released like years ago. So, like for me, waiting for a Game of the Year edition is no problem. Like, okay, I'll just wait for it. It's not that big of a deal. Like the only reason I buy, like as I told Aussie plenty of times, like I don't really pre-order games. I don't really like, I just wait for the Game of the Year edition. The only reason I bought Hades last year was because it was on sale and it was like a $10 off coupon off the Epic Game Store, and I was like, all right, I'll just it's $10. I'll just grab it.
I think I got it at the same time.
I think a lot of people at the same time were like, oh, you have to get this game, you have to get it. And like I want to touch upon another aspect that Aussie was talking about earlier about roguelikes. See, I'm generally not a fan of roguelikes. I hate actually starting over and over and over. Like I don't like that. I like coming.
So
well, like that's the thing though. Since for me, I like being able to have some kind of progress. Like I like to be able to like, okay, and I get that beating a boss, like if you like Dark Souls, the whole point of Dark Souls is you die over and over and over again, and eventually you beat the boss and so on and so forth. You kind of move forward, and that's progress, But for me, I like making progress in the story. I like making progress to know that, hey, I got 20% to the story. That's amazing. Like I got through it. But like with the roguelike, you always go back to the start. And the thing I like about Hades is that even if you die, there's progress you can see on the screen that you're making. Like what's his name? I even forgot his name. The main character's name starts with like a Z. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, even like he gets a little bit stronger. He gets a little bit. There's more interactions with the characters, because I feel like in most roguelikes, you go back to the start and the world is exactly like it is on the 90th try as it is on the first try. You know what I mean? Like nothing really changes. Whereas like in Hades, the characters respond differently to you each time you die. So I did enjoy that.
I've brought that up to a handful of people, like specifically regarding Hades. I think they did a really, really, really good job in that game of not making death all that punishing. Mm-hmm. Like there are some games where you die and you're just like, I'm stepping away from this for the rest of the night. Like I'm done with it. I think Hades did a really good job of when you die, you're like, ooh, I get like more little tidbits of the story each time. I get to find out some new stuff. I unlock this thing for my next run. And like you push a little bit further, and they did a really good job of having varied dialogue as well. So like when you're kind of like playing back through and getting to like the first boss or second boss or whatever, there's new dialogue, there's new things happening. I think Hades does a really good job of kind of pushing you to like jump back into that next playthrough. You're almost excited for the next playthrough, right? It's not a slog of like,
Yeah.
shit, I got to do this again.
That takes some real effort to try to make that balance fit. I know that going back to the classic games, I believe that a lot of people tell you what the best games are to play whenever you pick up a new system. And anybody who, whenever you were kids, your friends had the system and then you beg your parents to get one and then they get it for you, and then your parents ask, well, what games do you want? And you ask your friends and they go, oh, you've got to have a blah, blah, blah. And that game for me was Metroid Prime. People said I had to try Metroid Prime because Metroid was classic and it was supposed to be like the greatest thing. And I got about 20 minutes into Metroid Prime and put it down. And it wasn't because I'm a kid who's impatient, but rather I loved video games, and I still do. But I started playing, and I felt like I was going back to the same place 1,000 times. And I talked to my friend, and they said, oh yeah, it's cyclical in a way. You have to go back, and then you get a new path unlocked later, and you have to go back and get a new thing. And I'm like, this sounds really, really lazy. This sounds really, really boring. So I tried, but I felt like I wasn't actually making any progress. And restarting and restarting and restarting, even though it wasn't restarting the game necessarily, it was restarting from the same, not even like a spawn point, but the same base time and time and time and time again. And I feel that games that have a restart system of, if you can go a little further, that's okay. But even that gets really annoying. Like, you have to go back home by the nighttime or the werewolves will get you, and then you can't venture out, so you have to venture out slowly, and then maybe you get more skills to stay out a little bit later or travel a little bit further. That's a very fine line to tread, game developers. That's very, very fine, because if literally you're just extending my bungee cord slightly before you draw me back to the base for me to try again, you have to work really hard to keep me involved in a game that does that. You really have to make that bungee cord extension feel rewarding as opposed to tedious, where it's just a matter of out-stubborning the game developers. And I'm stubborn as a mule, but even I have my limits, where I better be rewarded to all get out for having to restart this from the beginning all over again. Yeah. I don't like that feeling of, well, you might get better. No, I want to see the shiny at the end of the rope. I want that shiny. Lure me in with the shiny. But if you're telling me, if you're going the right direction, you may get rewarded. You lost me. Sorry, I don't want to restart a game and be punished for it. Make it replayable with joy.
Yeah, and there's a handful of games I can think of that kind of fall into that category, where they really are focused around starting over every single time, but there's not necessarily great rewards, or there's rewards for like a certain period of time, right? You first start off and maybe you're unlocking a new class or you get a new area unlocked, but then like after the first couple playthroughs, it just kind of becomes stagnant and, like you said, tedious. There's a certain point where it's like, okay, doing the same thing for little to no reward is not fun.
Yeah.
It's not something that most people enjoy. So yeah, I think it's a very, very fine line.
I think if you come back to a game, that there should be an option for, I'm an adult with a working life and I don't remember all your controls. And as much as you would like to believe that I've spent my last 3 months practicing your controls so I'm ready for your DLC, the fact is I haven't. And again, it's a fine line and the developers have to think about the way to approach it. If it's just an option for, hey, it's been a while, would you like a tutorial about what you were doing? And the answer is probably going to be yes, please. I would very much like a tutorial about who you are and what my plot is and what I'm doing here. That would be great. Or even to incorporate something where if you've been away from the game for longer than a couple of weeks, maybe, that you have like a cutscene where you wake up and it's like, hey, you hit your head pretty hard there. You want a reminder about what you did? I think that'd be great. I think that's a great way to involve welcoming you back and integrating it into the plot, as opposed to, hey, dumbass, you stepped away from the game for too long and you don't remember what you're doing and now you suck, even though you're in a far more difficult area than you were at the beginning of the game, but we don't want to send you back to tutorial mode, but we also don't want you to keep dying to these things that were easy for you back then, but now you don't remember how to fight.
Damn,
I feel like that
Artie,
would be
let it all out.
appropriate.
Let it all out, Artie. It's all good.
Anger!
One game I'd actually give a lot of credit for exactly what you're talking about is actually Dragon Quest XI. That was a game that I'd started ages ago, kind of like put down because The Witcher 3 came out on Switch and I got distracted with that. But, every single time you start off that game, Dragon Quest XI, it gives you like a 2-page thing of like, here's catches, like this is what happened on the story, like here's where you're at, and it like gives you a rundown of like everything. And
That's
they
amazing.
really good job of it. And like even each little story point, they have like this whole updated like breakdown of everything that's happened in the story, or like here's where the hero's at. And it's
That's
great
amazing.
for somebody like me who's terrible at keeping up on games, because I can go back and know that it's going to kind of fill me in, you know?
I feel like Fire Emblem
Suppose-
did something similar to that in one of their games, where you had the journal that you could review about who you talked to and what you were doing and what the map looked like in those areas. It's like, thank you. Forgive me for not having you as my sole focus game.
Yep.
I was gonna say this brings up an interesting conundrum, if you will, because when you talk about games like you've been away for a long time, one of my first thoughts goes to MMOs.
Oh, God,
MMOs
yes.
don't have those are always changing, always. So if you just take 5 months away from an MMO, yeah, good luck.
I at the very beginning of quarantine, I got really into Final Fantasy 14.
I know a lot of people have, yeah.
500 hours into that game in like a month and a half. Like it was pretty bad.
Damn.
But
Damn.
there's a lot of different classes in that game. You know what I mean? There's the tanks, the healers, your DPS, and like you can seamlessly switch between all of them on one character. And I'm like notorious for having just alts in games. So like I'm that guy who has like an alt for every job. And the fact that I could play everything on one character in that game was like perfect to me. So I was just like, yeah, I can just hop around, play whatever I want. Don't even have to worry about switching characters. But that's also probably one of the biggest reasons like I haven't and probably won't go back to it, is because I'm like, I would have to relearn like 7 classes.
Yeah.
I'd have to relearn every single dungeon of like, oh, this is the group that has like the one-hit kill move. I gotta not pull them with this other. You know, just relearning every little aspect of an MMO is such a daunting task.
It is, especially when they've added so much content. And it's one of the reasons why I've always said like it's so much easier. Which is one of the reasons why I was excited for New World, is because Aussie and I have talked about this. It's like it's a brand new MMO, so like everyone's kind of starting fresh. You don't have to walk in and learn like 6 years of history.
You're not going to be the guy like dicking your team over when you go down.
Yeah, exactly. And pretty much everyone's starting fresh, and you're learning. Everybody's learning at the same time. You don't have to catch up, like I said, on 5 to 6 years of what's happening. And somebody who gets invested into the lore and the story, I mean, MMOs really are notorious for the story. Let's be honest, but like I still like knowing what's going on with the world and how it affects how it affects the gameplay and stuff like that. So it makes it a lot easier when you're just going in fresh and you can see all the changes. You can participate as the story progresses.
You can grow. You can grow with the game. And I know that I tried to go back to Perfect World. Aussie looked me in the webcam and agreed with me that Perfect World also screwed over returning players. Wow.
Probably.
Wow. It really did. And I tried to go back to Perfect World, and bless these people, they keep posting on their Facebook page new mounts and everything, and the comments are all basically, I gave up on you years ago. I tried to come back, and I feel for them, but they're desperately trying to haul themselves out of this hole they've dug themselves into, and they just can't do it. So I came back to Perfect World years ago, and tried to play around with their new aspects, and one of them was kind of this avatar game collecting thing where you can go into a different dimension and build your houses with these things and battle them and make them stronger. It did at no point did it give you a tutorial if you're a returning player about how the hell to do this. Not once. So I knew about avatar cards because I had left the game right whenever avatar cards had been introduced. And I was using them and I was making them stronger, and I used to talk with people in the game who were friends who knew more about this. But whenever I came back, most of those friends were gone, so even if they had been playing, I didn't have a tutorial system set up in my network. And now, I did not know anything at all about what was going on. I played around with it, but it doesn't give you a tutorial, and in the very little ways that it tried, it's in a very language barrier-esque kind of way. And that's the other problem I have with MMOs or games in general, is that they feel, even if it's a native language to you, like if you have a game that's written by American developers and it's all in English, you get kind of blindsided with your own knowledge whenever you're building or creating something. And I'm guilty of this as a music teacher. I do it all the time, and I can't blame game developers for this. But they think that because it's obvious to them, it should be obvious to you. So you come back to a game and they're like, oh yeah, you just blah blah the blah blah and hook this thing up to that thing and then you're good to go. And you're like, how did I get this thing in the first place? Where is this thing from? What does it do? You know, they don't explain things well enough. And I feel that MMOs in particular, like as said, falls into this trap. You're stuck. Yeah. You cannot come back to this and imagine that you're going to do well because A, your community is going to judge you for not knowing. Oh, you're level 300 something or other? Oh, you must know all about this. I know nothing. Please don't assume I'm good at this. I'm not anymore. I was 300 once upon a time, and then I came back and I'm still 300 because I didn't make a new character, but it does not mean I know what I'm doing. Right. Don't make that assumption.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it easier to hop back into games like FPS games and stuff like that. Like I have a bad tendency to like you know, if I'm like after a long day of work, I'm just always like instead of hopping back into like instead of like I keep saying I want to keep playing Hades, I'm like okay, I gotta restart Hades, but it's like I'd rather just go play Splitgate, that's like my recent thing, so it's like I'd rather just go because it's so much easier to hop into a game that doesn't need you to do anything, you know what I mean, other than load the game up and shoot some heads.
Mm-hmm.
That's literally all you gotta do. So it's, for me,
go ahead.
What else? No, I was just gonna say like it's more easier like for me to start it like play a game that doesn't require me to actually get invested in a story rather than like actually have to focus and try to remember everything that happened in the game. It's kind of like a form of procrastination, if you will. It's just like oh, do I really want to get back into this game where I have to learn everything all over again, or rather just load up this game, play with some friends, have a good time, and not worry about it,
Yeah, some of those bigger games can really be like a commitment to start or restart as well. It's just like a time investment, relearning it, trying to get back into it, trying to get back into the story, trying to push through it again. But yeah.
I do think that's a good point, Aussie. I find that I am more inclined to start a new game than restart a game I enjoyed because of that. And that's something that developers need to be aware of as well. If you go out and take a survey, are you more interested in starting a new game or restarting a game with new content that you used to play and really, really enjoyed? Inevitably, the answer is probably going to be, I want to start a new game because of the reasons we're bringing up. You did not welcome us back into this with the assumption that we didn't know what we were doing anymore. And particularly if you pick one of those games, and I feel for them, everybody wants to do the new thing, and for a while there, and I think the early 2000s, everybody was changing their key locks. Like, space is jump. I'm sorry, game developers. Space is jump. Period. No questions asked. Space is jump. Early 2000s, everyone was shifting their key locks to make their game unique. You're not doing yourself a favor.
Yeah.
You're not helping. You're making your game harder.
Any first-person shooter and try to like press F for melee, and it doesn't melee. I'm like, what the fuck is this game?
Yeah, no. F is always melee, space is always jump.
Yep.
I don't know. Yeah, it's weird.
Or like somebody was like, yeah, crouch is on V. Like, why?
Why
would I press V to crouch?
Crouch is
I'm not usually a guy that crouch is mostly control for me actually, because more easy.
Yeah, or control.
Or C, one of the two.
Yeah, but it's always weird. Like, I'm not a guy that really messes around with key bindings a lot. Like, for the most part, if a game has decent key bindings, I'm like, all right, screw it, I'll stick around. But like, if a game doesn't have spaces jump, I'm like, okay, well, what the heck were you thinking? Like, what's going on here?
It's been that way since the development of games where you could jump in a game. Space is jump on your keyboard. So if you're trying to make yourself unique by setting your key bindings to something that we're not familiar with, and then you have the audacity to put in DLC and say, oh, welcome back to our game that, by the way, we gave it hard enough for you to control in the first place, but we're just making an assumption that you know exactly what we're doing, and we're not going to let you change the key bindings. You've lost me entirely. Now, I'm done. Sorry, I can't. I cannot learn your key bindings and their key bindings and everybody else's key bindings and then remember the story. You're asking too much of my small, fragile, broken brain. Don't do this to me as a gamer. And a lot of us are older. We're older now. We are of the generation where our brains are starting to go. Az is a young one. Let him handle it for the rest of us. Az is young.
I wish.
Us old fish. We need simplicity.
I was gonna say, just to rewind a second, like Az was talking about first-person shooters right now, it's kind of like easier to jump into first-person shooters. I would argue that depending on the game too, depending on like what you're trying to jump into, it can actually be like very difficult if you're playing like a competitive side, for example, where there's like matchmaking. Because it's like last time I played, I was rated pretty high. Now I haven't played for 6 months and I jump back in. Like I feel like I want my rating to degrade over time because otherwise I jump back in and playing people that were as good as I used to be and get my ass completely kicked, you know, or like, for example, Overwatch was a game that I got really into for a while, and then trying to go back to Overwatch now, like I just have no interest whatsoever in the competitive side of it because I'm like, I'm going to get my ass beaten. I'm going to get pissed off.
I want to feel coddled coming back into a first-person shooter game, honestly, and that feels kind of stupid to say because it's like, oh, you want to feel babied whenever you're going to go and blast something's head off? Yes, I do. I really do. Borderlands 2, I'm looking at you because they constantly brought in new weapons, new games, new bosses, new blah, 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 blah. They do not tell you how to get there. They do not welcome you into that. You have to ask again, you have to reach out to the community and just be like, hey, I'm coming back. What is all this? And the game should give me a better idea. And I feel that particularly if they're welcoming in new weapons, how many times have you walked away from a game, particularly a first-person shooter, thinking, I have the best equipment in the game, I can end, and then you come back to this new DLC, and they go, oh, well, your weapon sucks now. As far as I was aware, it was the best weapon in the game. I thought I was fine. And so you come back feeling like, I want to go take out this boss, and then, God forbid, in the first-person shooter online community is some of the most toxic people that I have ever run into in gaming
That's
history.
one way to put it.
They are so aggressive and so mean. And they're just like, you're still using a bloody blah blah whenever you have new thingamajig? Wow, you're such a noob. I'm new again. I'm not. And they look at your level. They look at your level and they go, oh, okay, this person knows what they're doing. Please don't be fooled. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't. And maybe if there was a big old graphic over my head or a big glittery sign saying, welcome back so-and-so, you would stop judging me for not having the fancy new gear or not knowing what I'm doing anymore because, frankly, I don't. And I want to be a little bit more coddled being back into a game by being aggressive with your DLCs and your add-ons and your new weapons and stuff. You're not making me feel like I want to play this again. I don't like being punished for coming back to your game when I should be rewarded for it. That feels very icky to me. And I'm trying to think of other games that have done this, but Borderlands 2 stands out as the one game where, admittedly, Borderlands 2 is known for its very crass, dry humor, deprecating humor, where it just attacks you as a person, and that's something it's known for. But there are ways to balance that out a little bit. So can y'all think of any games where you come back, not necessarily even a community game, but community games are what I'm thinking of, where you actually have online play, but games where you've come back and felt like, hey, I know what I'm doing, and then you don't know what you're doing, and worse yet, the game does not define it for you in the least?
Nope. Whenever I come back to a game, I was like, I have no idea what the heck I'm doing, so...
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, on the note of like shooters, I think two that come to mind for me are Destiny, because like I really enjoyed Destiny 1 and 2. But then like every time they added DLCs, I came back and I was like, I have no fucking idea what I'm doing. I don't know how this works. I don't know what I'm supposed to do for this boss. You're just jumping in and like crossing your fingers, you know.
I think that's one of these actually stopped playing Aussie last year. Because like last year, because some of my friends got into Destiny 2. Like during quarantine, they're like, "Oh, Az, you got to play this game. You got to play this game, right?" And I go back into it, and I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, there's so much, and I kid you
No
not,
clue.
I think the game is like what 60, 70 gigabytes, however big the game is. I
Mhm.
literally spent a good 20, 30 minutes trying to figure out what to do because like I had played the game previously, years before when it first came out. And I come back to all this nonsense.
You
Like,
have an objective. You don't know what it is.
yeah, it says go talk to this person, but I'm like, where is this person? Like, and there's so much going on your screen. I kid you not, after 30 minutes, I just uninstalled the game. I'm like, I'm done. I'm
I'm
not even
so
bothering.
glad you brought
I'm not
that
even-
up. I am so
So-
glad you brought that up in particular. Go and talk to this NPC to learn more about this new boss. I'm sorry, you're assuming I remember who the hell this person is, what they look like, or what city they're in. Unless you're going to draw me a map or teleport me to them. Then
Great
please
point.
don't say, hey, go and talk with Bartholomew over in City 9, because they'll be able to help you out. And then City 9's like the biggest city in the game. And you go over and you're looking desperately for this guy? No. That's the big one too, Az. I'm glad you brought it up, because that does remind me of things that do that. Come back. Go talk to so-and-so. Who?
I think Destiny 1 and 2 are definitely up there for me in games that like I loved when they first dropped and then had no idea what was going on for DLCs. And then not to keep going back to Overwatch, but that's a game where like the meta is shifting so frequently that you go back and you just have like no idea what's going on. And like I do feel like that game has kind of a toxic community, because like if you jump into a competitive game and you're not playing like the in tank right now that you're
Yeah.
or who's just come out and you don't know how to play, people will like shit on you for it.
Yep.
Right? I have distinct memories of like this one match I was playing, and for anybody who's familiar with Overwatch, there's a character Pharah who can like fly up and shoot at stuff, and there was like a meta for a while where like a healer who can also fly would just like glue themselves to the Pharah
Pharmacy.
and like heal it. It's like Mercy Pharah, horrible combo. Anyhow, I remember distinctly like playing a match and we were like in the fray of stuff, and our healer was healing the tanks, and there was a Pharah on our team who like wasn't getting boosted by our healer, and they just started like screaming at the healer in voice chat, like absolutely just tearing them apart. Like, why aren't you healing me? You're just fucking useless, blah, blah, blah. And like I remember getting in voice chat and being like, dude, they're clearly not letting you die intentionally. They're trying to heal our tanks, which is what a healer should do. And like, yeah, that's the thing. Like, I felt so bad for the person playing the healer, because like they're clearly not intentionally letting their team die, right? You're not going to jump into a competitive game and be like, I'm going to play a healer and not heal. Like, they're clearly doing what they can, but this person's just like ripping them apart for it. And it's just mind-boggling to me.
I don't know
I'll
what
say
I'm
to your
doing at
statement there,
that
Aussie. I like to say to your statement there, Moira main say hi.
What's that?
Were you ever in the gameplay Moira? Yeah, because Moira mains.
That's like my main healer, but it's pretty much as a DPS, you know.
Yeah, I don't think Moira mains actually heal. But anyways, sorry, Artie, what were you gonna say?
No, that's one of the biggest problems out there too, Aussie, is that we do come back with new classes or new things, and if you're coming back after it's been introduced and after these strategies have been established, and people assume you know what you're doing, again, because you have the armor of Once Upon a Time days where you're obviously high level or your name is well established or something like that, they just assume you know what you're doing, and then you don't. You don't know what you're doing. You have to hope you get a really good community, and whenever I came back to PWI, somebody was calling for a tank in Flow Silver Palace. And I know that tanks are very valuable in Flow Silver Palace, and I happen to have one. And I said, guys, it's been years. You're going to have to forgive me on this. I know I need to keep the aggro on Toad, but I don't know where you want me anymore. And it's like, thankfully, I got a team that was pretty understanding about that. They were just happy to have a tank at this point, because I was the only one who volunteered to do it. But I think that if you come back and you don't know strategies, and people start yelling at you, you don't want to come back at that point. You really don't, and I don't want to do hours and hours of research on the new DLC to find out what I should be doing. I just want to come back and play. So don't punish me for that.
Any multiplayer-based game, trying to come back to it, the community is like a huge, huge aspect for me. That is one thing, like going back to Final Fantasy XIV, that is one thing I will give them kind of like credit for, is in the time that I played it, everyone that I ever ran anything with was like very understanding. I don't think I ever had anyone really giving
at least you had that
amount of shit, you know?
Yeah, at least you had that going for you, because it can be so detrimental to the return of a game, and particularly the online communities. But if you involve a new class where you do have to work with other players, or if you come back to a game And they have, God bless them, MMOs, you try so hard. They tried to balance the classes by worse than adding things to other classes, taking away from the class that was overpowered. Stop it. And I will never forget this happening in Tibia. In Tibia, they decided that druids can no longer heal through walls. And it ruined it for me. It just destroyed it. Now I get where they're coming from. Druids can't heal through walls because they can't see their line of sight target. Okay, fine. But for years, we were allowed to heal through walls. So I would often sit in the pub and some poor little blessed noob would have been bitten by a snake and poisoned and desperately trying to run back to the monk, and they're at like 4 HP and hauling butt through the town as fast as they can, and I'd sit inside the pub and just turn around and Exorcio this guy and heal him, and he'd be super grateful. I have no idea where it came from. And then I had to chase these poor suckers down and be like, stop moving! Stop! I couldn't heal you through the wall anymore. Anytime you come back to a game where they have nerfed a character class or built another one up, and then you are part of a community and they go, oh, you don't know about blah, 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 what are you, a noob? Well, technically, yes. New at this particular thing. I've played this class forever, but I stopped because it got boring, and then they added this, so you're gonna have to give me a minute. And I wish that they would just give you more options for whenever you do come back to a game, regardless of whether or not it's online, to say, I need a tutorial about this. Give me tips, give me hints, give me ideas about this, but do not just give me this skill and then assume I know what to do with it.
I want like a summary of patch notes from the last time that I played, too. Like, just
that'd be kind of cool.
Hit me with like every balance change that's happened.
Yes. In a very concise, beautiful way, as opposed to just like reading this long list of script.
The Cliff Notes version.
Yep.
It would be nice to have something where you could go and talk with an NPC who runs you through like a cinematic of that kind of thing. Just like, hey, from the last time you logged in, you've got this kind of thing going on now. Or you can use this skill. I think that'd be great. I get that it would be tedious or boring or even difficult to code into some of the games, but it would be so valuable to players who really want to see that without going on YouTube and watching 1,000 videos of, hey guys, since last time on whatever game, we've involved these things, and then you have like 1,000 sponsor notices and everything else. Speaking of sponsorship, I just...
What a great segue.
Yeah, here's my segue. Now, y'all know what I'm talking about. But I want to have a little bit more coddling. I just want more of that balance between welcome me back to your game. I do want to play it. I obviously enjoyed it in the first place. But quit trying to throw so much glitter and hats on things that I no longer know what I'm looking at when I get back here. It's a completely different game, and I would like to keep playing, but I don't want to restart entirely because I knew something about the game. I knew a little bit. I'd like to keep playing with it, but I also want to have a chance to get to know you again in this new setting.
So one thing I wanted to kind of like bring up regarding starting over is, over there, I feel like the past couple of years in the gaming industry in particular, like remakes and remasters, I feel like have been just exploding. You know what I mean? Like back in the day, you never really had remakes or remasters of games, whereas I feel like the past few years, it's been just huge.
Yep.
So I guess my question to you guys is, does that compel you to go back to a game? If you did play a game as a kid, now there's a remaster and it's updated graphics and everything, do you want to go back to that? Or, if there was a game that you never finished, but now there's like maybe it was too clunky or like felt a little too out of date, and now there's a spiffed up version of it, does that compel you to play it? Or do you kind of feel like it's more of a lazy cash grab to be like, here's this old thing with a new set of paint?
But it depends. Like I said, it depends on the game. For me, the one that just came out, the first thing that comes to mind is Kingdoms of Amalur. I don't know if anybody's heard of it. Yeah, so Kingdoms of Amalur was a game that I was looking forward to. It came out in 2011 or 2012, somewhere around there. And I remember I was really looking forward to it. And I did play the game eventually a couple of years down the line. Like I think like 2-3 years down the line, I played the game. And it was fine. I think I got like halfway through the game. And I kind of stopped for whatever reason. I just stopped, And then they just came out with a new version called Re-Reckoning. Like, it's basically like they updated some stuff. But see, the thing is, a lot of people said that it wasn't that different from the original game, anyways. So like in that case, it's more obvious of a cash grab, and if that happens, I'm not gonna buy a game. Like if they had actually updated a lot of stuff and changed how everything works, I would have been like, okay, I'm gonna buy it, and then that would have rekindled my interest in the game.
See, it's funny you actually brought up that game because that was a game I remember having like a gaming magazine when I was a kid that had an ad for Kingdoms of Amalur, and I remember seeing it and being like, "This looks awesome! I really want to play this." And then I just never had the opportunity to pick it up at that point in my life. And then when they announced Re-Reckoning, I think they initially did it with like a cinematic trailer, and I saw it and I was like, "Oh shit, this game's coming back! This is my opportunity!
Yeah.
This is great!" And then I started seeing gameplay, and I was like, "This looks old."
Yeah, like they didn't update the graphics that much. Yeah, they just basically ported over like a 10-year-old game and didn't even update they just slightly updated the graphics. I think they added some 4K textures here and there, but
re-released on a new system, not remastered.
Yeah, exactly.
In that case, it was like, I think I'm good. Like maybe if I can get it super cheap sometime, I'll check it out. But I think just going back and playing something like that is tough if it's not a big improvement, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it has to be a good enough improvement.
I haven't played the remaster, but like Final Fantasy VII, for example, completely rehauled. Which, granted, that's like one of the most popular games of all time, so it makes sense that they have some cash to throw at it. But you can clearly tell that game, it's just a complete remaster from the ground up. So
they really worked hard on that one from what I was watching with, and I never. Okay, go ahead and burn me at the stake of gaming. I never played through Final Fantasy VII. Either one.
Dun 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 dun.
I know, right? It's just suddenly I'm gonna get the little hamster gif, the kind of shock. No, I've never done it, and I'm familiar enough with the characters. I'm familiar enough with the plot. I've had friends play it. I've watched it played. I know the game, but I've never actually done it. And I was watching it played, and I thought, wow, they really did clean this up a lot. Holy cow. That's wild. They redid it, and my first instinct to your question was no, hell no, actual no, reality no. Do I want to play remastered versions of the same old game? No. But as I think about it, maybe?
It's done right, I feel like.
Yeah, it really depends. It really depends on the game and what they did. If they change all of it, like if they change the graphics, then maybe I want to do it for the graphic purposes, but for older style games, sometimes I feel that my imagination was filling in a lot of that, and I don't want them to ruin it for me. It's kind of like watching a movie that got done by your book. You had it in your head. You don't want to ruin what you had in your head already. So maybe.
I did want to bring a point there. Sorry, I do want to bring a point there. It's like I'd only play a remaster of a game if I never finished the first game or never started in the first place, kind of thing. So like exactly, that's why Kingdoms of Amalur, I was bringing that up because I never got to finish it. So I was like, I'll just play the updated version instead. But like if I, for example, Witcher 3, I know. But Witcher 3 got this brand new graphics update just a couple months ago, I think, or it's about to come out. I haven't kept track, but it was going to be a brand new graphics update. Like graphics are going to look even more amazing and stuff like that. So, but like I already finished Witcher 3. And I don't really have any inclination to kind of go back to it.
To pull you back in.
Yeah, it's not enough to pull me back. Like I already finished all the DLC. I basically finished the entire game. So just because they have a brand new graphics update, it's like I'm not gonna go back, honestly, because I already have 20 million games that I've yet to even touch in the first place that I still need to play. So for me, a remaster only works if I haven't played the first game or never got a chance to finish the first game in the first place.
Yeah. Or if they did something particularly new. I know that, and not speaking on story-based games like Witcher 3, where you obviously have a lot of plot, let's go with something far simpler and far overdone. Worms. Worms was an original PC game once upon a time where you played worms that killed each other. And then they came out with Worms Warfare and Worms 3D and worms everywhere. And then you could say that those are remasters as opposed to sequels because they kind are. But they added new maps and new weapons. I'm more inclined to play remasters of games where I'm seeing them add a little bit in addition than if that's just, we made the graphics prettier. Or, oh, we redid the voice acting. Oh, yeah, that's a big one for me. If you are remastering a game and changing the voices or adding voices, I am more likely to not pick up that game because I had it in my head as it was. Don't ruin this for me.
We're supposed to sound.
I want the sound to be... Think about it. If you listen to something playing and you hear a game sound from Once Upon a Time that you knew, how many times have we heard somebody walk by back whenever we didn't all have our phones on vibrate? And I used to have the Metal Gear Solid alert sound on my text messages, and it would turn heads. So if you come back at me and be like, oh, we're going to change that sound, now you've lost me. Just that's iconic to that game. That's something...
I'll say, I don't necessarily mind updates to it, but yeah, I feel like there are certain things, or like you got to keep like some sort of like homage to the original in there. You know what I mean? You got to like maintain kind of what made a classic.
Exactly. If you're gonna remaster a game, then is it a filthy cash grab? Probably, because there's no new original ideas coming at people. But if there was something genuinely wrong with the game, something that caused, and we've talked about it in the past, I believe that a game is great even if it has glitches and I don't care. And I want to keep playing past the glitches. That's whenever a game is great. Whenever I look at a game that's buggy and broken and I go, but I want to keep going. That's a great game. Now, if you remaster a game because you look at that glitch, and it's not just a cutesy glitch where it's like, oh, look, they phased through the wall here, that's adorable. You know, no, but something's actually kind of game-breaking, and then you remaster it to fix the glitch, that I will play. Because you're correcting an obvious error that I had major issues with in the game. But then if you go, oh, we're going to fix this glitch and we're going to make it easier by doing blah blah, now you've lost me. I just wanted that one problem fixed. But
so, as a follow-up, because I've actually gotten this question more than once while streaming, I'm kind of curious if you guys have as well. If you could choose one game to get a full-on like Final Fantasy VII style remaster, what would your one game be?
My favorite game of all time.
Go on.
Thousand Arms.
Thousand Arms, okay.
Thousand Arms is a game that, like I said a while back, whenever you get a new system, your friends say, oh, you need to get this game, and Thousand Arms was on that list that a friend told me to get. And the game itself is not mind-blowing, but it has nostalgia for me. If I was going to get a game that had that redo, it would be Thousand Arms, as long as they kept the original voice acting, and if they fixed the glitches in the game. For example, you need to go east, or I'm sorry, this one's one of my favorites. Go west out of town and go to the cave. There is no cave to the west. The cave is north, and at the beginning of the game, you will spend 1,000 decades trying to find this damn cave because the guy says go west. They fixed that, and I am over the moon thrilled. And it does happen in the game.
There's something really funny, actually, about that. So, speaking of, earlier I brought up Dragon Quest XI. You can play through that game with sets of rules that are called draconian rules, and they're basically ways to make the game harder. And one of those is basically like NPCs are scumbags and will lie to you. So like you talk to
That's amazing.
In
wow.
mode, it'd be like, oh yeah, you have to go to the east to find this. If you have this one setting on, he's like, yeah, you better go south to find that cave. So like it's literally
that's amazing.
You can like set it so that the game completely lies to you.
That's amazing. Okay, now I'm going to go pick up this game because that just sounds glorious. It's
a really good game.
That would be fun. That's a fun version of a remaster. That's what I'm talking about. If you're going to add some stuff to the game, do shit like that. Keep it original, but then give you the option to be like, hey, we changed the personality of these NPCs as an option, not as something forced. As a, we wanted to make this a little bit harder on you, you know, homage to the original. That's the way to remaster a game, developers. That's the way to do it. That sounds brilliant.
Yeah.
On the other hand, for me, I'd say I don't want anything else changed other than the graphics. Like if I had to pick just one thing, I'd choose the graphics. It'd be Dragon Age Origins. No. Dragon Age Origins.
Okay.
That was one of my that game to me still holds a special place in my heart, and that's an amazing game. And if they came out with a remaster of it, like as in like just updated graphics, made it so it's compatible with 4K, ultra wide monitor, all that kind of stuff. Like they just upgraded 2021 standards. I would go back and play that game, replay it.
I've always heard like great things about the Dragon Age games. Never really like dove into them.
The first one is the best one. The first one is the best one. The second one is complete trash. Well, not complete trash. It's regular trash. And then the
standard
third one,
trash.
I don't know which one it is.
The Inquisition came out, which by the way,
I think that's
me being a huge Dragon Age fan, I remember when Inquisition was first announced, I was so hyped for it. But after like what happened with 2, because I remember like not camping out, but I remember like I remember Dragon Age 2 was announced. I remember going to the store like the very next day and buying Dragon Age 2, you know what I mean? Like at GameStop, and I was like so excited, and it was complete trash, you know what I mean? It was just like, damn. Like compared to Dragon Age Origins, everyone can agree Dragon Age 2 was a major letdown. So for me, the Dragon Age Origins hold a special place in my heart. So like if they could redo Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age, I haven't played Inquisition, but like if they redo the Dragon Age series, I would go back and play them all over again.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's funny. I had always heard great things about Dragon Age, never played any of them. And then whenever Inquisition was coming out, I remember seeing cutscenes, like trailers and stuff, and just being like, "This looks pretty sweet."
It is a very cool, awesome RPG.
Yeah, and I think I played maybe like an hour or 2 of the story. There was like a multiplayer thing that I played a little bit of with.
Yeah, that was back in the day.
Like, there's so much to do in it. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot coming. There's a new game coming out, so. Oh yeah.
Like that game has a lot of options, a lot to do. But no, I was gonna say, I think my go-to, or what I always tell people on stream, is actually The Legend of Dragoon, which is like an old school RPG for the PlayStation 1. I loved that game. However, it's a game that I never finished. I played it several times, got like onto the 3rd of 4 discs back in the day, which for a 10-year-old or whatever age I was at the time was a lot of time into a game. And I remember there was one point where I got stuck. I'm like going through this giant freaking mountain, and everything there is like kicking the shit out of me. Like I think I was a little bit underleveled, but then there's a save point. I'm like, finally a save point. And so I save, and then there's a boss, and it was a boss that I just like did not have the stuff to clear. So I was stuck. Like in front of me is a boss I can't kill. Behind me is a mountain full of shit that's gonna kill me. And I was just stuck. And I was like, okay, I'm kind of done with this game for a while. And then I went back later and like tried to replay through it again. And I don't think I even got that far into it. But yeah, I don't know. What I did play of that game, I have very, very fond memories of that game. It was one of the first games I ever got on the PlayStation 1, and it was just something about it kind of struck me. So I think if I could have like a full remaster of a game, I would love for it to be that game, and I think that would be enough to compel me to go back and play through it, because it's one of those games where like I keep wanting to go back and replay it, but then I look at the graphics and I'm just like, this did not age well. Like that whole era of PlayStation 1, like N64 graphics, every time I look at those types of games, I'm just like, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can go back and jump
back. I do want to touch upon one other thing here. Like, speaking of Dragon Age and that kind of stuff, the one that just came out, Mass Effect Legendary Edition, that just came out, where they just bundled all the games together and they actually updated quite a few stuff. What I mean by that is, I remember playing Mass Effect 1 back in the day and absolutely hating it because of the thing called the Mako, like the terrain vehicle. I didn't like the way it handled. I didn't like the whole space exploring aspect it had, and I kind of like wrote off the entire Mass Effect series based on that. And then years later, I played Mass Effect 2 and absolutely adored Mass Effect 2. You know what I mean? So like, but then I heard in the Legendary Edition, they kind of went back to it, the updated graphics of Mass Effect 1, but they also, redid the whole space exploration thing to make it smoother, more better. So now I'm actually looking forward to going back and replaying the entire Mass Effect series over again.
Yeah, that's another series that has always like I've always heard fantastic things from everyone who's played it. Like I've never heard anyone talk poorly about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
And seeing that, like the Legendary Edition with all three, I think it's all three.
Yeah, all three. Yeah, all three. Yeah, basically.
Like I've actually been tempted to pick that up and check it out, just because I'm like, I mean, can't be that bad. Right?
Yeah, I was actually waiting for that too, honestly. I've been waiting for a sale, and I might pick it up myself.
If you remaster something, just make sure you don't half-ass it on the way back into it. Don't don't try to get too big for your britches over here and say, okay, we're going to redo the graphics, we're going to redo all this kind of stuff, and then release it and it's glitched. If the original game could do it, you can do it. And I feel like that's something that we run into these problems a lot with games coming out half-baked and people buying them half-baked because they're too excited, and then they get ahead of themselves and they go, I really want this, I really, 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 really want this, and then they release it and they go, oh, by the way, we're releasing all these patches to try to fix it.
Yeah.
And remastered, the games are already there.
Every game has a day one patch nowadays.
Oh yeah.
Of course. Well, games are hard to code nowadays, so...
Yeah, like the second you start up a game, you're like, ooh, been waiting for this. Like, I remember the last several, so I don't really go to midnight releases a whole lot, but the last like several times that I did, I was like, midnight release, fucking hyped for this game, let's go. And then it has
Day
a
one
patch.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm playing it tomorrow anyhow. Great.
Just release it whenever it's done and clean and ready and tested and good to go. Because if they got it right the first time, you never get a second chance to make a first impression with me, and since you're already trying to make a second impression with me by releasing a game that I once enjoyed, you better be doing it in a very, very, very clean way. I enjoyed this game once, and if you try to redo it, and I'm excited for the redo, and then you screw it up the very first time out of the gate, I'm going to have little faith in your ability to keep my classic game that I loved in the same kind of way that I enjoyed back then. I want the nostalgia to be clean and refreshed. It's kind of like pulling something out of an attic that you got in a dusty old chest somewhere, and you pick it up and you just go, oh, I remember this, and oh, wow, and you clean it up. Or somebody who cares about you gets something out of the basement and goes, hey, do you remember this? I cleaned it for you. And you're like, oh, it's so pretty and new. But if they come back at it and they've chipped it and broken it and made it look awful, you go, I remember this being a lot nicer, because it was. Because back in the day, for your desire back then, it was a lot cleaner and a lot prettier, and then somebody takes it out and goes, I want to make it better, and then they ruin it. And the only thing I can think of that really makes this point is, anybody remember years ago whenever that woman tried to redo the painting of Jesus? And then it ended up being this meme about, like, potato Jesus, because she completely ruined this classic work of art and just destroyed it. That's kind of what it feels like, is... This was already, it was a little cracked, it was a little broken, and you wanted to make it better, and then you destroyed it. And now what I believed was beautiful, was great once upon a time, and maybe it's a little rusty, like you're saying, the PS1 graphics are a little hard to swallow with our old eyes, you know, a little too rough, and monitors have gotten so much nicer now that PS1 graphics, think about it. These are monitors that are not capable, and it's not that it's like, oh, they're not capable of handling PS1 and N64 graphics. In fact, it's the other way around. They're so strong that putting anything that has those really blocky graphics on it makes it look even worse.
I was gonna say, yeah, the Tube TV, you know, it matched the Tube TV a little better than like super high def garbage.
Yeah.
It really fit a Tube TV so much better, and I used to keep an old, big, massive monitor just for playing old games on, because it just looks better on that old, gritty, gross monitor. It just does. So I don't want to watch a remastered game where, if you're asking me to restart the game anyway, please don't make it worse for me. Just, if nothing else, just leave it alone and re-release it on a new console, like y'all talked about. Just putting it on a new console and making it so it doesn't have that new graphic monitor disconnect. That's the best thing they could do for some of these classic games. Isn't necessarily rehauling them, but just making them more compatible with the technology we have today.
I will say one thing that I really appreciate about the Switch is there's a lot of stuff getting re-released on that console that like wasn't necessarily you know, there's a lot of games that I guess missed out on because I didn't necessarily have whatever console they were on, or just I was playing other things at the time, that are now getting re-released onto the Switch. And I think a lot of older graphics kind of translate pretty well to like a smaller screen.
They really do.
Most of the time I play my Switch handheld rather than docked, and I feel like kind of compressing some of that down into a smaller screen makes it look not quite so bad as if you stretch it out onto something huge. And then on top of that, I think one thing I will say, you know, for getting me to replay something or play something for the first time, that I maybe missed, I do think having a handheld, like just having that portability, having that accessibility, really helps me to jump into something along those lines.
Agreed.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Agreed.
Mobility, convenience is a very high selling point of any game. It's just being convenient. So make it convenient for us to come back to games, please. And I do think that gives us enough time for us to wrap it up here. Finishing thoughts, anybody who, we talked about the games we want to see remastered. We talked about the dangers of remastering games. As Aussie, do you have anything to say to viewers or developers or gamers in general about restarting from scratch?
Don't do it. Just finish the game. Finish the game in the first place.
Just finish it in the first place. Quit trying to reset.
Yeah.
That's all you say, don't do it, because I was literally just speaking of starting over in general. Before we were going live today, I was thinking about it, and I was like, I think I moved 7 times throughout my 20s. So I am a big advocate of starting over.
Damn, that is a lot of moving, dude. That is a lot of moving.
Yeah, for better or worse, I'm a big fan of starting over, starting things fresh, and it's really hit or miss in video games. I do feel like one nice thing about streaming is I almost feel compelled to finish things when I start them on stream. So I've kind of utilized streaming as like an opportunity to like push myself through games that I've been wanting to play that I know if I started off stream, I'd probably just kind of burn out on, fizzle out, play other things. So, starting over is not the worst thing. It could be worse.
It could be worse. Get the encouragement. To keep going. And if you're going to restart, then just be patient with yourself for restarting, because that's what you're doing exactly. It's going to take some time for you to get back to where you were, regardless of what new weapon or gear. What was it, Aussie?
I said rewire the old brain box.
That's right.
Yeah.
Rewire and restart once again, just like we do. We took a long hiatus from the podcast, but we're doing our little restarts here, and that's what happens. So as you continue to restart in your games, restart in whatever it is you're doing in your lives, then keep in mind, you're not the only ones. Thanks for joining us. We are Party Buff. That's Azrenix, Oscitater, and myself, GoodRootsGames, and we're going to see you guys next time. Take care.
See ya.
Party Buff.